Welcome back. This week, Agenda was in Washington, D.C. At a critical time for America's relations with the rest of the world, I spoke to one of the most influential politicians in America, Hillary Clinton. In a wide-ranging interview, we covered the legacy of the Clinton White House, the influence of big business on decision-making, a woman's place in the world, and Irish neutrality. I began by asking her what it felt like to make the transition 2 years ago from the White House to the US Senate.
It was a very good feeling because I felt that it had been a good 8 years for America and the world. I was very proud of my husband and the presidential decisions that he made on behalf of so many important concerns. So I didn't feel anything other than a great sense of gratitude and satisfaction. And as I say, it was ending. So it wasn't as though there were a choice. And we were very fortunate that he didn't leave office defeated, that he was able to serve 2 full terms. But then I was looking forward because I had already been sworn in as senator a few days before the time in the White House ended. So I was already thinking about my new job, and I was very lucky to be able to do that.
One of the things you're very, very famous for is talking about women's roles, the role of women in society, etc. Do you think that a huge amount of women feel frustrated because maybe they're in their husband's shadow or their own ambitions are put in the back burners because of family, but ultimately women feel that they're not actually getting a fair crack of the whip?
Well, you know, that's not been my observation and experience because we are so fortunate, women in Ireland, women in the United States, that we live at a time when the opportunities and choices for women are so broad. And that, to me, is a great gift. It wasn't like that for my mother, or certainly my grandmothers. And I think it is up to every woman to make the decisions that are right for her and her family. And the choices now are the full range of human experience. A woman can be choosing to be a full-time wife and mother and feel extraordinarily satisfied and knowing that she's making a very important contribution. A woman can forego being married and motherhood because she has other senses of what's important to her. Most of us try to muddle through. You know, we have responsibilities at home and we have responsibilities in the workplace, and we try to make a contribution in the larger world. I can't help but think as we are talking, it's just a few days after the terrible, tragic explosion that cost the lives of the crew on the Columbia. There were 2 women on that space shuttle mission. That would never have happened when I was growing up. So the opportunities, the risks, the choices, the full sense of being human in every way that one defines it are now available for women. But it's an individual choice. There isn't any cookie cutter. There's no formula that you can pass out and say, well, here's the formula for success or happiness. Each person, man and woman, has to choose that and do it in their own way.
Hillary Clinton, you said a couple of years ago there was a vast right-wing conspiracy against you and your husband. Who are these people?
Well, you know, I think that there is certainly a very broadly organized effort to change the policies of the last 50 years, not just the Clinton administration, but going back much further. We see it in so many ways, and these are people who are currently in power in our administration here in Washington. They have every right to promulgate their points of view, but it is, I think, quite telling that in so many ways they are undoing not just the work of the Clinton administration, but raising questions about every administration going back to President Franklin Roosevelt. And I think that that's part of the political process. And what I was trying to point out then, and what I try to point out now, is that there's a lot worth debating about and fighting for in our political system, and we have to get out and do it.
When people use the word, let's say, like conspiracy, it gives us the image that there's a variety of powers, like the media and other powers, people behind the scenes, moving to attack people like yourself, liberals. Do you really think this is the case?
I can only speak from our experience that, you know, there were many different kinds of groups and organizations that were just dead set against my husband's policies, and they came together in common cause to try to prevent him from being as successful a president as he was. And it wasn't in the electoral system. It was, through foundations and organizations and lawsuits and the like. But that's what you have to accept. There is a lot of difference of opinion in our political system right now. The country is divided pretty much down the middle.
That's a very generous view.
Well, we have to accept the fact that it's divided pretty much 50-50. And if you believe in something, as I do, about what the right direction to go in, you have to fight for it. When just speaking on something that is very much related to the work that Bill did in Northern Ireland, when he began that, there was a tremendous outcry and opposition to his involvement. Many people thought it was a big mistake for the President of the United States to become involved in any way in trying to encourage and facilitate reconciliation and peace in the North. He did it anyway, but it engendered a lot of opposition and people who had a very different set of beliefs and values. Well, you can take that kind of conflict and you can look at it internationally and domestically. We are engaged in some very high-stakes political struggles right now, which I think people have to recognize. And there are ideological and political and partisan and commercial interests.
Such as?
Well, you can look at the rollback in all the environmental regulations that are going on in the United States, the withdrawal from even discussing, let alone complying with the Kyoto Accords. Drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, making it easier for power plants to pollute. Those are all tremendous setbacks for what should be the smart policy that the United States should be a leader of internationally, that we work toward environmental protection and sustainable economic growth at the same time. But instead, that's not what's happening. Or if you take the issue of energy, here we are dependent, and increasingly so, on energy from a very unstable part of the world, and yet this administration gives only lip service to becoming more energy independent.
Many Europeans, Hillary Clinton, will say that the entire war is about oil, it's about vested interests. Would you agree with this analysis?
No, I don't agree with that at all. I do think that our concern here in the United States is focused on the dangers that Saddam Hussein poses, and particularly with weapons of mass destruction. But the very fact you can ask the question makes my point. If we were moving toward energy independence, if we had made the determination that the United States would be more conservation-minded, that we would have a tax system that rewarded alternative energy sources, then the question wouldn't even be raised. And the true problem posed by Saddam Hussein and the kind of military intentions that he has demonstrated in the past and still harbors today would be the focus of the debate in Europe and elsewhere.
You said they're corporate interests, and we were talking about oil. Now, obviously, one of the big issues is the fact that the guys in the White House now seem to be from an oil background. Who exactly runs America? Is it the corporations or the people?
Well, I think, our system is a very multi-layered system. There are many different power sources, but there's absolutely no doubt that business, particularly large business in certain sectors like the energy sector, have an extraordinary amount of influence because of the way we finance and run our political campaigns, which are reliant upon money from private individuals and the private sector.
Should you have a cap then?
Well, we should have public financing.
Yeah, well, should you not just say, dispense with all this stuff?
The money should not be visible and influential. It ought to be fought out on ideas and platforms, but that's not our system, and there are constitutional problems with trying to put caps. But your question is a fair one. This has always been a tension in America, and it's always been a struggle to keep the balance in the center where it needs to be, so that the various forces of influence and power are all balanced off against one another. The genius of our founders was to recognize that a balance of power was essential in order to hold in check human needs and greed and all that goes with being a human being, and to set up institutions both within our government and throughout our country that could provide a check on one another.
Now, you said the genius of the founders. Something that struck me in America is the obsession with these geezers who lived 200, 300
They were pretty smart geezers,
They were smart
David.
geezers,
They were smart guys.
But there is an obsession. Is there a tyranny of the founding fathers in this country?
No, I don't think so. In fact, I think to the contrary, when you know our history, it is an extraordinary testament to the power of the human imagination and the ability to set forth goals that seemed highly unrealistic, even unimaginable at the end of the 18th century. I mean, the story of America is making good on those goals and values, to continue to widen the circle of opportunity, to bring in African Americans, to bring in women, to break down the barriers that still prevent people from feeling that they are part of the meritocracy and have a stake in America's future. So I think it was a work of genius. The real challenge to us today is whether or not we're keeping faith with those underlying ideals and values. And of course, I am concerned that the principal problem with the administration currently in power is that it is much too oriented toward short-term political gain at the expense of long-term future planning and rewards. And that is the kind of problem that could very well leave this generation of Americans, my generation, the president's generation, as being the first that does not leave their children better off than we were. That would be breaking faith, not only with the founders, but with our parents and our grandparents, who understood that the way America has always prospered and flourished is by making hard decisions today that will make us richer and safer and smarter and stronger in the future. Not in some illusory, quick fix, political, partisan way, but in a way that really keeps faith with values and is hard-headed and realistic about the world in which we live. So I think that there's a lot that we're going to be, looking to try to sort out in our electoral system in the years ahead.
Is America big enough yet for a woman president?
Well, I hope sometime in my lifetime that occurs. It's a very tough system for anyone, man or woman, because you have to run to the entire country. It's not a parliamentary system where you can win in a constituency and where people know you and can call you by your first name. It is a very media-driven system, and of course it requires huge amounts of money that have to fuel the election. So it's a very daunting undertaking for anyone. But there are a number of very effective, strong, impressive women in the pipeline, both in Washington and throughout the states. And I'm an optimist, so I think someday that will happen.
Can I look at an issue that's going on in Ireland at the moment? People are saying if we do not allow American planes to land, that American business will respond by pulling out their business investment from Ireland. Would you agree with that?
Obviously, I would hope that the Irish government and the Irish people support our men and women in uniform should they have to take military action in order to disarm Saddam Hussein. Because I think that the stakes are very high, not just for the Middle East and not just for the United States, but really for the entire civilized world. The war against terrorism is a war that involves all of us. And the principal reason that Iraq is considered an important place for us to focus on is because of the proliferation of such weapons, potentially into the hands of not just rogue nations like Iraq, but obviously rogue terrorist groups. So, of course, I fully support freedom of speech. I'd like even greater debate because I think it's good for a democracy, and I respect Ireland tremendously. But I don't think that that will have an effect on our doing business. But I hope that as events unfold, particularly in light of what Secretary Powell presented today to the United Nations, the people of Ireland will, as they have so many times before, be supportive of our efforts to try to prevent problems that would come to haunt our children.
Hillary Clinton, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Now, as